Egypt, officially the Arab Republic of Egypt, is a country spanning the northeast corner of Africa and southwest corner of Asia by a land bridge formed by the Sinai Peninsula. Egypt is a Mediterranean country bordered by the Gaza Strip and Israel to the northeast, the Gulf of Aqaba and the Red Sea to the east, Sudan to the south, and Libya to the west. Across the Gulf of Aqaba lies Jordan, across the Red Sea lies Saudi Arabia, and across the Mediterranean lie Greece, Turkey and Cyprus, although none share a land border with Egypt. Egypt has one of the longest histories of any country, tracing its heritage back to the 6th–4th millennia BCE. Considered a cradle of civilization, ancient Egypt saw some of the earliest developments of writing, agriculture, urbanization, organized religion and central government. Iconic monuments such as the Giza Necropolis and its Great Sphinx, as well the ruins of Memphis, Thebes, Karnak, and the Valley of the Kings, reflect this legacy and remain a significant focus of scientific and popular interest. Egypt's long and rich cultural heritage is an integral part of its national identity, which has endured, and often assimilated, various foreign influences, including Greek, Persian, Roman, Arab, Ottoman Turkish, and Nubian. Egypt was an early and important center of Christianity, but was largely Islamized in the 7th century and remains a predominantly Muslim country, albeit with a significant Christian minority. From the 16th to the beginning of the 20th century, Egypt was ruled by foreign imperial powers, the Ottoman Empire and the British Empire. Modern Egypt dates back to 1922, when it gained nominal independence from the British Empire as a monarchy. However, British military occupation of Egypt continued, and many Egyptians believed that the monarchy was an instrument of British colonialism. Following the 1952 revolution, Egypt expelled British soldiers and bureaucrats and ended British occupation, nationalized the British-held Suez Canal, exiled King Fahd and his family, and declared itself a republic. In 1958 it merged with Syria to form the United Arab Republic, which dissolved in 1961. Throughout the second half of the 20th century, Egypt endured social and religious strife and political instability, fighting several armed conflicts with Israel in 1948, 1956, 1967 and 1973, and occupying the Gaza Strip intermittently until 1967. In 1978, Egypt signed the Camp David Accords, officially withdrawing from the Gaza Strip and recognizing Israel. The country continues to face challenges, from political unrest, including the recent 2011 revolution and its aftermath, to terrorism and economic underdevelopment. Egypt's current government is a semi-presidential republic headed by President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi, which has been described by a number of watchdogs as authoritarian. Islam is the official religion of Egypt and Arabic is its official language. With over 95 million inhabitants, Egypt is the most populous country in North Africa, the Middle East, and the Arab world. The third most populous in Africa after Nigeria and Ethiopia, and the 15th most populous in the world. The great majority of its people live near the banks of the Nile River, an area of about, where the only arable land is found. The large regions of the Sahara Desert, which constitute most of Egypt's territory, are sparsely inhabited. About half of Egypt's residents live in urban areas, with most spread across the densely populated centers of Greater Cairo, Alexandria and other major cities in the Nile Delta. The sovereign state of Egypt is a transcontinental country considered to be a regional power in North Africa, the Middle East and the Muslim world, and a middle power worldwide. Egypt's economy is one of the largest and most diversified in the Middle East, and is projected to become one of the largest in the world in the 21st century. In 2016, Egypt overtook South Africa and became Africa's second largest economy after Nigeria. Egypt is a founding member of the United Nations, Non-Aligned Movement, Arab League, African Union, and Organization of Islamic Cooperation.
Names.
The English name Egypt is derived from the ancient Greek, via Middle French Egypt and Latin. It is reflected in early Greek linear tablets as Akupitio. The adjective Egypti, Aegyptios was borrowed into Coptic as, and from there into Arabic as, back formed into, whence English Copt. The Greek forms were borrowed from late Egyptian Amanahicopta Memphis, a corruption of the earlier Egyptian name O6TPRD28Z1PTH, meaning home of the castle of Da, the name of a temple to the god Tit Memphis. Is the classical Quranic Arabic and modern official name of Egypt, while is the local pronunciation in Egyptian Arabic. The name is of Semitic origin, directly cognate with other Semitic words for Egypt such as the Hebrew. The oldest attestation of this name for Egypt is the Akkadian Ru related to me, Ru/me, Iru/me, Aru, meaning border or frontier. The ancient Egyptian name of the country was KMMTO49, which means black land, likely referring to the fertile black soils of the Nile floodplains, distinct from the Deshret, or red land of the desert. This name is commonly vocalized as Kemet, but was probably pronounced in ancient Egyptian. The name is realized as and in the Coptic stage of the Egyptian language, and appeared in early Greek as. Another name was land of the riverbank. The names of Upper and Lower Egypt were Tashemi Sedgeland and Tamehu Northland, respectively.
History. Prehistory in ancient Egypt.
There is evidence of rock carvings along the Nile terraces and in desert oases. In the 10th millennium BCE, a culture of hunter-gatherers and fishers was replaced by a grain-grinding culture. Climate changes or overgrazing around 8000 BCE began to desiccate the pastoral lands of Egypt, forming the Sahara. Early tribal peoples migrated to the Nile River where they developed a settled agricultural economy and more centralized society. By about 6000 BCE, a Neolithic culture rooted in the Nile Valley. During the Neolithic era, several pre-dynastic cultures developed independently in Upper and Lower Egypt. The Badarian culture and the Succession Akkad series are generally regarded as precursors to dynastic Egypt. The earliest known Lower Egyptian site, Merimda, predates the Badarian by about 700 years. Contemporaneous Lower Egyptian communities coexisted with their southern counterparts for more than 2,000 years, remaining culturally distinct, but maintaining frequent contact through trade. The earliest known evidence of Egyptian hieroglyphic inscriptions appeared during the pre-dynastic period on Naqada III pottery vessels, dated to about 3200 BCE. A unified kingdom was founded c. 3150 BCE by King Menes, leading to a series of dynasties that ruled Egypt for the next 3 millennia. Egyptian culture flourished during this long period and remained distinctively Egyptian in its religion, arts, language and customs. The first 2 ruling dynasties of a unified Egypt set the stage for the Old Kingdom period, c. 2700 to 2200 BCE, which constructed many pyramids, most notably the 3rd dynasty Pyramid of Djoser and the 4th dynasty Giza pyramids. The first intermediate period ushered in a time of political upheaval for about 150 years. Strong Nile floods and stabilization of government, however, brought back renewed prosperity for the country in the Middle Kingdom c. 2040 BCE. Reaching a peak during the reign of Pharaoh Amenemhat III. A second period of disunity heralded the arrival of the first foreign ruling dynasty in Egypt, that of the Semitic Hyksos. The Hyksos invaders took over much of Lower Egypt around 1650 BCE and founded a new capital at Avaris. They were driven out by an Upper Egyptian force led by Ahmose, who founded the 18th dynasty and relocated the capital from Memphis to Thebes. The New Kingdom c. 1550 to 1070 BCE began with the 18th dynasty, marking the rise of Egypt as an international power that expanded during its greatest extension to an empire as far south as Tombos in Nubia, and included parts of the Levant in the east. This period is noted for some of the most well-known pharaohs, including Hatshepsut, Thutmose III, Akhenaten and his wife Nefertiti, Tutankhamun and Ramesses II. The first historically attested expression of monotheism came during this period as Atenism. Frequent contacts with other nations brought new ideas to the new kingdom. The country was later invaded and conquered by Libyans, Nubians and Assyrians, but native Egyptians eventually drove them out and regained control of their country.
Achaemenid Egypt.
In 525 BCE, the powerful Achaemenid Persians, led by Cambyses II, began their conquest of Egypt, eventually capturing the pharaoh Psamtik III at the Battle of Pelusium. Cambyses II then assumed the formal title of pharaoh, but ruled Egypt from his home of Susa in Persia, modern Iran, leaving Egypt under the control of a satrapy. The entire 27th dynasty of Egypt, from 525 to 402 BCE, save for Petubastis III, was an entirely Persian-ruled period, with the Achaemenid emperors all being granted the title of pharaoh. A few temporarily successful revolts against the Persians marked the 5th century BCE, but Egypt was never able to permanently overthrow the Persians. The 30th dynasty was the last native ruling dynasty during the Pharaonic epoch. It fell to the Persians again in 343 BCE after the last native pharaoh, King Nectanebo II, was defeated in battle. This 31st dynasty of Egypt, however, did not last long, for the Persians were toppled several decades later by Alexander the Great. The Macedonian Greek general of Alexander, Ptolemy Isota, founded the Ptolemaic dynasty.
Ptolemaic in Roman Egypt.
The Ptolemaic kingdom was a powerful Hellenistic state, extending from southern Syria in the east, to Cyrene to the west, and south to the frontier with Nubia. Alexandria became the capital city and a center of Greek culture and trade. To gain recognition by the native Egyptian populace, they named themselves as the successors to the pharaohs. The later Ptolemies took on Egyptian traditions, had themselves portrayed on public monuments in Egyptian style and dress, and participated in Egyptian religious life. The last ruler from the Ptolemaic line was Cleopatra VII, who committed suicide following the burial of her lover Mark Antony, who had died in her arms from a self-inflicted stab wound, after Octavian had captured Alexandria and her mercenary forces had fled. The Ptolemies faced rebellions of native Egyptians often caused by an unwanted regime and were involved in foreign and civil wars that led to the decline of the kingdom and its annexation by Rome. Nevertheless, Hellenistic culture continued to thrive in Egypt well after the Muslim conquest. Christianity was brought to Egypt by Saint Mark the Evangelist in the 1st century. Diocletian's reign 284 to 305 marked the transition from the Roman to the Byzantine era in Egypt, when a great number of Egyptian Christians were persecuted. The New Testament had by then been translated into Egyptian. After the Council of Chalcedon in 451, a distinct Egyptian Coptic church was firmly established.
Middle Ages 7th century - 1517.
The Byzantines were able to regain control of the country after a brief Sasanian-Persian invasion early in the 7th century amidst the Byzantine-Sasanian War of 602 to 628, during which they established a new short-lived province for 10 years known as Sasanian Egypt, until 639 to 42, when Egypt was invaded and conquered by the Islamic Empire by the Muslim Arabs. When they defeated the Byzantine armies in Egypt, the Arabs brought Sunni Islam to the country. Early in this period, Egyptians began to blend their new faith with indigenous beliefs and practices, leading to various Sufi orders that have flourished to this day. In 639 an army of some 4,000 men were sent against Egypt by the second caliph, Umar, under the command of Amr ibn al-As. This army was joined by another 5,000 men in 640 and defeated a Byzantine army at the Battle of Heliopolis. Amr next proceeded in the direction of Alexandria, which was surrendered to him by a treaty signed on 8 November 641. Alexandria was regained for the Byzantine Empire in 645 but was retaken by Amr in 646. In 654 an invasion fleet sent by Constans II was repulsed. From that time no serious effort was made by the Byzantines to regain possession of the country. The Arabs founded the capital of Egypt called Fustat, which was later burned down during the Crusades. Cairo was later built in the year 986 to grow to become the largest and richest city in the Arab Empire, and one of the biggest and richest in the world.
Abbasid period.
The Abbasid period was marked by new taxations, and the Copts revolted again in the 4th year of Abbasid rule. At the beginning of the 9th century the practice of ruling Egypt through a governor was resumed under Abdullah ibn Tahir, who decided to reside at Baghdad, sending a deputy to Egypt to govern for him. In 828 another Egyptian revolt broke out, and in 831 the Copts joined with native Muslims against the government. Eventually the power loss of the Abbasids in Baghdad has led for general upon general to take over rule of Egypt, yet being under Abbasid allegiance, the Ikhshids and the Tulunids dynasties were among the most successful to defy the Abbasid Caliph.
The Fatimid Caliphate and the Mamluks.
Muslim rulers nominated by the Caliphate remained in control of Egypt for the next 6 centuries, with Cairo as the seat of the Fatimid Caliphate. With the end of the Kurdish Ayyubid dynasty, the Mameluks, a Turco-Circassian military caste, took control about 1250. By the late 13th century, Egypt linked the Red Sea, India, Malaya, and East Indies. The mid-14th century Black Death killed about 40% of the country's population.
Early modern. Ottoman Egypt 1517 to 1867.
Egypt was conquered by the Ottoman Turks in 1517, after which it became a province of the Ottoman Empire. The defensive militarization damaged its civil society and economic institutions. The 1784 famine cost it roughly 1/6 of its population. Egypt was always a difficult province for the Ottoman sultans to control, due in part to the continuing power and influence of the Mameluks, the Egyptian military caste who had ruled the country for centuries. Egypt remained semi-autonomous under the Mameluks until it was invaded by the French forces of Napoleon Bonaparte in 1798. See French campaign in Egypt and Syria. After the French were defeated by the British, a power vacuum was created in Egypt, and a three-way power struggle ensued between the Ottoman Turks, Egyptian Mameluks who had ruled Egypt for centuries, and Albanian mercenaries in the service of the Ottomans.
The Muhammad Ali dynasty.
After the French were expelled, power was seized in 1805 by Muhammad Ali Pasha, an Albanian military commander of the Ottoman army in Egypt. While he carried the title of Viceroy of Egypt, his subordination to the Ottoman Porte was merely nominal. Muhammad Ali massacred the Mameluks and established a dynasty that was to rule Egypt until the revolution of 1952. The introduction in 1820 of long staple cotton transformed its agriculture into a cash crop monoculture before the end of the century, concentrating land ownership and shifting production towards international markets. Muhammad Ali Pasha evolved the military from one that convened under the tradition of the corvée to a great modernized army. He introduced conscription of the male peasantry in 19th century Egypt, and took a novel approach to create his great army, strengthening it with numbers and in skill. Education and training of the new soldiers became mandatory. The new concepts were furthermore enforced by isolation. The men were held in barracks to avoid distraction of their growth as a military unit to be reckoned with. The resentment for the military way of life eventually faded from the men and a new ideology took hold, one of nationalism and pride. It was with the help of this newly reborn martial unit that Muhammad Ali imposed his rule over Egypt. The policy that Muhammad Ali Pasha followed during his reign explains partly why the numeracy in Egypt compared to other North African and Middle Eastern countries increased only at a remarkably small rate, as investment in further education only took place in the military and industrial sector. Muhammad Ali was succeeded briefly by his son Ibrahim in September 1848, then by a grandson Abbasi in November 1848, then by Said in 1854, and Ismail in 1863, who encouraged science and agriculture and banned slavery in Egypt. Other circumstances like epidemic diseases, cattle disease in the 1880s, Floods and wars drove the economic downturn and increased Egypt's dependency on foreign debt even further. In later years, the dynasty became a British puppet. Ismail and Tewfik Pasha governed Egypt as a quasi-independent state under Ottoman suzerainty until the British occupation of 1882. Local dissatisfaction with Ismail and with European intrusion led to the formation of the first nationalist groupings in 1879, with Ahmad Urabi a prominent figure. Fearing a reduction of their control, the UK and France intervened militarily, bombarding Alexandria and crushing the Egyptian army at the Battle of Tel el-Keba. They reinstalled Ismail's son Tewfik as figurehead of a de facto British protectorate. In 1906, the Dinshaway incident prompted many neutral Egyptians to join the nationalist movement.
British Protectorate 1882 to 1952.
The Khedivate of Egypt remained a de jure Ottoman province until the 5th of November 1914. When it was declared a British protectorate in reaction to the decision of the Young Turks of the Ottoman Empire to join World War I on the side of the Central Powers. In 1914, the protectorate was made official, and the title of the head of state was changed to Sultan, to repudiate the vestigial suzerainty of the Ottoman Sultan, who was backing the Central Powers in World War I. Abbas II was deposed as Khedive and replaced by his uncle, Hussein Kamal, as Sultan. After World War I, Saad Zaghloul and the Wafd Party led the Egyptian nationalist movement to a majority at the local legislative assembly. When the British exiled Zaghloul and his associates to Malta on the 8th of March 1919, the country arose in its first modern revolution. The revolt led the UK government to issue a unilateral declaration of Egypt's independence on the 22nd of February 1922. The new government drafted and implemented a constitution in 1923 based on a parliamentary system. Saad Zaghloul was popularly elected as Prime Minister of Egypt in 1924. In 1936, the Anglo-Egyptian Treaty was concluded. Continued instability due to remaining British influence and increasing political involvement by the king led to the dissolution of the parliament in a military coup d'état known as the 1952 Revolution. The Free Officers movement forced King Farouk to abdicate in support of his son Fuad. British military presence in Egypt lasted until 1954.
Republic 1953 present.
Following the 1952 revolution by the Free Officers movement, the rule of Egypt passed to military hands. On the 18th of June 1953, the Egyptian Republic was declared, with General Muhammad Naguib as the first president of the Republic, serving in that capacity for a little under 1.5 years.
Tenure of President Nasser 1956 to 1970.
Naguib was forced to resign in 1954 by Gamal Abdel Nasser, a pan-Arabist and the real architect of the 1952 movement, and was later put under house arrest. After Naguib's resignation, the position of president was vacant until the election of Gamal Abdel Nasser in 1956. Nasser assumed power as president in June 1956. British forces completed their withdrawal from the occupied Suez Canal zone on the 13th of June 1956. He nationalized the Suez Canal on the 26th of July 1956, prompting the 1956 Suez Crisis. In 1958, Egypt and Syria formed a sovereign union known as the United Arab Republic. The union was short-lived, ending in 1961 when Syria seceded, thus ending the union. During most of its existence, the United Arab Republic was also in a loose confederation with North Yemen or the Mutawakkilite Kingdom of Yemen, known as the United Arab States. In 1959, the All-Palestine government of the Gaza Strip, an Egyptian client state, was absorbed into the United Arab Republic under the pretext of Arab Union, and was never restored. In the early 1960s, Egypt became fully involved in the North Yemen civil war. The Egyptian president, Gamal Abdel Nasser, supported the Yemeni Republicans with as many as 70,000 Egyptian troops and chemical weapons. Despite several military moves and peace conferences, the war sank into a stalemate. Egyptian commitment in Yemen was greatly undermined later. In mid-May 1967, The Soviet Union issued warnings to Nasser of an impending Israeli attack on Syria. Although the Chief of Staff Mohammad Fawzi verified them as baseless, Nasser took 3 successive steps that made the war virtually inevitable. On 14 May he deployed his troops in Sinai near the border with Israel. On 19 May he expelled the UN peacekeepers stationed in the Sinai Peninsula border with Israel, and on 23 May he closed the Straits of Tiran to Israeli shipping. On 26 May Nasser declared, "The battle will be a general one and our basic objective will be to destroy Israel." Israel reiterated that the Straits of Tiran closure was a casus belli. In the 1967 Six-Day War, Israel attacked Egypt, and occupied Sinai Peninsula and the Gaza Strip, which Egypt had occupied since the 1948 Arab-Israeli War. During the 1967 war, an emergency law was enacted, and remained in effect until 2012, with the exception of an 18-month break in 1980-81. Under this law, police powers were extended, constitutional rights suspended and censorship legalized. At the time of the fall of the Egyptian monarchy in the early 1950s, less than 500,000 Egyptians were considered upper class and rich, 4 million middle class and 17 million lower class and poor. Fewer than half of all primary school-age children attended school, most of them being boys. Nasser's policies changed this. Land reform and distribution, the dramatic growth in university education, and government support to national industries greatly improved social mobility and flattened the social curve. From academic year 1953 to 54 through 1965 to 66, overall public school enrollments more than doubled. Millions of previously poor Egyptians, through education and jobs in the public sector, joined the middle class. Doctors, engineers, teachers, lawyers, journalists constituted the bulk of the swelling middle class in Egypt under Nasser.
Tenure of President Sadat 1970 to 1981.
In 1970, President Nasser died and was succeeded by Anwar Sadat. Sadat switched Egypt's Cold War allegiance from the Soviet Union to the United States, expelling Soviet advisors in 1972. He launched the in-fit-to economic reform policy, while clamping down on religious and secular opposition. In 1973, Egypt, along with Syria, launched the October War, a surprise attack to regain part of the Sinai territory Israel had captured 6 years earlier. It presented Sadat with a victory that allowed him to regain the Sinai later in return for peace with Israel. In 1975, Sadat shifted Nasser's economic policies and sought to use his popularity to reduce government regulations and encourage foreign investment through his program of in-fit-to. Through this policy, incentives such as reduced taxes and import tariffs attracted some investors, but investments were mainly directed at low-risk and profitable ventures like tourism and construction, abandoning Egypt's infant industries. Even though Sadat's policy was intended to modernize Egypt and assist the middle class, it mainly benefited the higher class, and, because of the elimination of subsidies on basic foodstuffs, led to the 1977 Egyptian bread riots. Sadat made a historic visit to Israel in 1977, which led to the 1979 peace treaty in exchange for Israeli withdrawal from Sinai. Sadat's initiative sparked enormous controversy in the Arab world and led to Egypt's expulsion from the Arab League, but it was supported by most Egyptians. Sadat was assassinated by an Islamic extremist in October 1981.
Tenure of President Mubarak 1981 to 2011.
Hosni Mubarak came to power after the assassination of Sadat in a referendum in which he was the only candidate. Hosni Mubarak reaffirmed Egypt's relationship with Israel yet eased the tensions with Egypt's Arab neighbors. Domestically, Mubarak faced serious problems. Even though farm and industry output expanded, the economy could not keep pace with the population boom. Mass poverty and unemployment led rural families to stream into cities like Cairo, where they ended up in crowded slums, barely managing to survive. On the 25th of February 1986, security police started rioting, protesting against reports that their term of duty was to be extended from 3 to 4 years. Hotels, nightclubs, restaurants and casinos were attacked in Cairo and there were riots in other cities. A daytime curfew was imposed. It took the army 3 days to restore order. 107 people were killed. In the 1980s, 1990s, and 2000s, terrorist attacks in Egypt became numerous and severe, and began to target Christian Copts, foreign tourists and government officials. In the 1990s, an Islamist group, Al-Ghama al-Islamiyya, engaged in an extended campaign of violence, from the murders and attempted murders of prominent writers and intellectuals, to the repeated targeting of tourists and foreigners. Serious damage was done to the largest sector of Egypt's economy, tourism, and in turn to the government, but it also devastated the livelihoods of many of the people on whom the group depended for support. During Mubarak's reign, the political scene was dominated by the National Democratic Party, which was created by Sadat in 1978. It passed the 1993 Syndicates Law, 1995 Press Law, and 1999 Non-Governmental Associations Law, which hampered freedoms of association and expression by imposing new regulations and draconian penalties on violations. As a result, by the late 1990s, parliamentary politics had become virtually irrelevant and alternative avenues for political expression were curtailed as well. On the 17th of November 1997, 62 people, mostly tourists, were massacred near Luxor. In late February 2005, Mubarak announced a reform of the presidential election law, paving the way for multi-candidate polls for the first time since the 1952 movement. However, the new law placed restrictions on the candidates, and led to Mubarak's easy re-election victory. Voter turnout was less than 25%. Election observers also alleged government interference in the election process. After the election, Mubarak imprisoned Ayman, the runner-up. Human Rights Watch's 2006 report on Egypt detailed serious human rights violations, including routine torture, arbitrary detentions and trials before military and state security courts. In 2007, Amnesty International released a report alleging that Egypt had become an international center for torture, where other nations send suspects for interrogation, often as part of the war on terror. Egypt's foreign ministry quickly issued a rebuttal to this report. Constitutional changes voted on the 19th of March 2007 prohibited parties from using religion as a basis for political activity, allowed the drafting of a new anti-terrorism law, authorized broad police powers of arrest and surveillance, and gave the president power to dissolve parliament and end judicial election monitoring. In 2009, Dr. Ali Eldin Hilal Dessouky, media secretary of the National Democratic Party (NDP), described Egypt as a pharaonic political system, and democracy as a long-term goal. Dessouky also stated that the real center of power in Egypt is the military.
Revolution and Aftermath 2011 to 2014.
On the 25th of January 2011, widespread protests began against Mubarak's government. On the 11th of February 2011, Mubarak resigned and fled Cairo. Jubilant celebrations broke out in Cairo's Tahrir Square at the news. The Egyptian military then assumed the power to govern. Mohammed Hussein Tantoui, chairman of the Supreme Council of the Armed Forces, became the de facto interim head of state. On the 13th of February 2011, the military dissolved the parliament and suspended the constitution. A constitutional referendum was held on the 19th of March 2011. On the 28th of November 2011, Egypt held its first parliamentary election since the previous regime had been in power. Turnout was high and there were no reports of major irregularities or violence. Mohamed Morsi was elected president on the 24th of June 2012. On the 2nd of August 2012, Egypt's Prime Minister Hisham Kandil announced his 35-member cabinet comprising 28 newcomers including 4 from the Muslim Brotherhood. Liberal and secular groups walked out of the Constituent Assembly because they believed that it would impose strict Islamic practices, while Muslim Brotherhood backers threw their support behind Morsi. On the 22nd of November 2012, President Morsi issued a temporary declaration immunizing his decrees from challenge and seeking to protect the work of the Constituent Assembly. The move led to massive protests and violent action throughout Egypt. On the 5th of December 2012, tens of thousands of supporters and opponents of President Morsi clashed, in what was described as the largest violent battle between Islamists and their foes since the country's revolution. Mohamed Morsi offered national dialogue with opposition leaders but refused to cancel the December 2012 constitutional referendum. On the 3rd of July 2013, after a wave of public discontent with autocratic excesses of Morsi's Muslim Brotherhood government, the military removed President Morsi from power in a coup d'état and installed an interim government. On the 4th of July 2013, 68-year-old Chief Justice of the Supreme Constitutional Court of Egypt Adli Mansoura was sworn in as acting president over the new government following the removal of Morsi. The military-backed Egyptian authorities cracked down on the Muslim Brotherhood and its supporters, jailing thousands and killing hundreds of street protesters. Many of the Muslim Brotherhood leaders and activists have either been sentenced to death or life imprisonment in a series of mass trials. On the 18th of January 2014, the interim government instituted a new constitution following a referendum in which 98.1% of voters were supportive. 38.6% of registered voters participated in the referendum, a higher number than the 33% who voted in a referendum during Morsi's tenure. On the 26th of March 2014, Abdel Fattah el-Sisi, the head of the Egyptian Armed Forces, resigned from the military, announcing he would stand as a candidate in the 2014 presidential election. The poll, held between 26 and the 28th of May 2014, resulted in a landslide victory for el-Sisi. Sisi was sworn into office as President of Egypt on the 8th of June 2014. The Muslim Brotherhood and some liberal and secular activist groups boycotted the vote. Even though the military-backed authorities extended voting to a third day, the 46% turnout was lower than the 52% turnout in the 2012 election.
Geography.
Egypt lies primarily between latitudes 22 degrees and 32 degrees N, and longitudes 25 degrees and 35 degrees E. It is the world's 30th largest country. Due to the extreme aridity of Egypt's climate, population centers are concentrated along the narrow Nile Valley and Delta, meaning that about 99% of the population uses about 5% of the total land area. 98% of Egyptians live on 3% of the territory. Egypt is bordered by Libya to the west, the Sudan to the south, and the Gaza Strip and Israel to the east. Egypt's important role in geopolitics stems from its strategic position. A transcontinental nation, it possesses a land bridge, the Isthmus of Suez, between Africa and Asia, traversed by a navigable waterway, the Suez Canal, that connects the Mediterranean Sea with the Indian Ocean by way of the Red Sea. Apart from the Nile Valley, the majority of Egypt's landscape is desert, with a few oases scattered about. Winds create prolific sand dunes that peak at more than high. Egypt includes parts of the Sahara Desert and of the Libyan Desert. These deserts protected the kingdom of the pharaohs from western threats and were referred to as the Red Land in ancient Egypt. Towns and cities include Alexandria, the second largest city, Aswan, Asat, Cairo, the modern Egyptian capital and largest city, El Mahalou El Kubra, Giza, the site of the Pyramid of Khufu, Hurghada, Luxor, Komombo, Port Safaga, Port Said, Sharm el-Sheikh, Suez, where the south end of the Suez Canal is located, Zagazig, and Minya. Oases include Bahariya, Dakhla, Far Afra, Kaga and Siwa. Protectorates include Ras Mohammed National Park, Zaranik Protectorate and Siwa. On the 13th of March 2015, plans for a proposed new capital of Egypt were announced.
Climate.
Most of Egypt's rain falls in the winter months. South of Cairo, rainfall averages only around per year and at intervals of many years. On a very thin strip of the northern coast, the rainfall can be as high as mostly between October and March. Snow falls on Sinai's mountains and some of the north coastal cities such as Damietta, Baltim and Sidi Barrani, and rarely in Alexandria. A very small amount of snow fell on Cairo on the 13th of December 2013, the first time in many decades. Frost is also known in Mid-Sinai and Mid-Egypt. Egypt is the driest and the sunniest country in the world, and most of its land surface is desert. Egypt has an unusually hot, sunny and dry climate. Average high temperatures are high in the north but vary to extremely high in the rest of the country during summer. The cooler Mediterranean winds consistently blow over the northern sea coast, which helps to get more moderated temperatures, especially at the height of the summertime. The Khamaseen is a hot, dry wind that originates from the vast deserts in the south and blows in the spring or in the early summer. It brings scorching sand and dust particles, and usually brings daytime temperatures over and sometimes over in the interior, while the relative humidity can drop to 5% or even less. The absolute highest temperatures in Egypt occur when the Khamaseen blows. The weather is always sunny and clear in Egypt, especially in cities such as Aswan, Luxor and Asit. It is one of the least cloudy and least rainy regions on Earth. Prior to the construction of the Aswan Dam, the Nile flooded annually, colloquially the gift of the Nile replenishing Egypt's soil. This gave Egypt a consistent harvest throughout the years. The potential rise in sea levels due to global warming could threaten Egypt's densely populated coastal strip and have grave consequences for the country's economy, agriculture and industry. Combined with growing demographic pressures, a significant rise in sea levels could turn millions of Egyptians into environmental refugees by the end of the 21st century, according to some climate experts.
Biodiversity.
Egypt signed the Rio Convention on Biological Diversity on the 9th of June 1992, and became a party to the convention on the 2nd of June 1994. It has subsequently produced a National Biodiversity Strategy and Action Plan, which was received by the convention on the 31st of July 1998. Where many CBD National Biodiversity Strategy and Action Plans neglect biological kingdoms apart from animals and plants, Egypt's plan was unusual in providing balanced information about all forms of life. The plan stated that the following numbers of species of different groups had been recorded from Egypt: algae 1,483 species, animals about 15,000 species of which more than 10,000 were insects, fungi more than 627 species, Monera 319 species, plants 2,426 species, protozoans 371 species. For some major groups, for example lichen-forming fungi and nematode worms, the number was not known. Apart from small and well-studied groups like amphibians, birds, fish, mammals and reptiles, the many of those numbers are likely to increase as further species are recorded from Egypt. For the fungi, including lichen-forming species, for example, subsequent work has shown that over 2,200 species have been recorded from Egypt, and the final figure of all fungi actually occurring in the country is expected to be much higher. For the grasses, 284 native and naturalized species have been identified and recorded in Egypt.
Government.
The House of Representatives, whose members are elected to serve 5-year terms, specializes in legislation. Elections were last held between November 2011 and January 2012, which was later dissolved. The next parliamentary election was announced to be held within 6 months of the Constitution's ratification on the 18th of January 2014, and were held in 2 phases, from 17 October to the 2nd of December 2015. Originally, the parliament was to be formed before the president was elected, but interim President Adli Mansour pushed the date. The Egyptian presidential election, 2014, took place on 26–28 of May 2014. Official figures showed a turnout of 25,578,233 or 47.5%, with Abdel Fattah el-Sisi winning with 23.78 million votes, or 96. 9% compared to 757,511. 1% for Hamdeen Sabai, after a wave of public discontent with autocratic excesses of the Muslim Brotherhood government of President Mohamed Morsi. In 2013, Freedom House rated political rights in Egypt at 5, with 1 representing the most free and 7 the least, and civil liberties at 5, which gave it the freedom rating of partly free. Egyptian nationalism predates its Arab counterpart by many decades, having roots in the 19th century and becoming the dominant mode of expression of Egyptian anti-colonial activists and intellectuals until the early 20th century. The ideology espoused by Islamists such as the Muslim Brotherhood is mostly supported by the lower middle strata of Egyptian society. Egypt has the oldest continuous parliamentary tradition in the Arab world.
Law.
The legal system is based on Islamic and civil law, particularly Napoleonic codes, and judicial review by a Supreme Court, which accepts compulsory International Court of Justice jurisdiction only with reservations. The personal status law that regulates matters such as marriage, divorce and child custody is governed by Sharia. In a family court, a woman's testimony is worth half of a man's testimony. On the 26th of December 2012, the Muslim Brotherhood attempted to institutionalize a controversial new constitution. It was approved by the public in a referendum held the 22nd of December 2012 with 64% support, but with only 33% electorate participation. It replaced the 2011 Provisional Constitution of Egypt, adopted following the revolution. The penal code was unique as it contains a blasphemy law. The present court system allows a death penalty including against an absent individual tried in absentia. Several Americans and Canadians were sentenced to death in 2012. On the 18th of January 2014, the interim government successfully institutionalized a more secular constitution. The president is elected to a 4-year term and may serve 2 terms. In 2003, the government established the National Council for Human Rights. Shortly after its foundation, the council came under heavy criticism by local activists, who contended was a propaganda tool for the government to excuse its own violations and to give legitimacy to repressive laws such as the emergency law. The Pew Forum on Religion and Public Life ranks Egypt as the 5th worst country in the world for religious freedom. The United States Commission on International Religious Freedom, a bipartisan independent agency of the U.S. government, has placed Egypt on its watch list of countries that require close monitoring due to the nature and extent of violations of religious freedom engaged in or tolerated by the government. According to a 2010 Pew Global Attitude Survey, 84% of Egyptians polled supported the death penalty for those who leave Islam, 77% supported whippings and cutting off of hands for theft and robbery, and 82% support stoning a person who commits adultery. In February 2016, Giulia Regini, an Italian PhD student from the University of Cambridge studying trade unions and workers' rights in the country, was found brutally murdered in Cairo after he went missing in January of the same year. Subsequently, Italy withdrew its ambassador to Egypt. Egyptian law enforcement produced conflicting information on the fate of the Italian citizen, which was unacceptable to Italian investigators. As a result, the Italian press and foreign ministry pointed at the systematic human rights violations in Egypt, and threatened with political sanctions unless police leadership and practices undergo significant revisions. Coptic Christians face discrimination at multiple levels of the government, ranging from disproportionate representation in government ministries to laws that limit their ability to build or repair churches. Intolerance of Baha'is and non-Orthodox Muslim sects, such as Sufis, Shia and Ahmadis, also remains a problem. An Egyptian court ruled in early 2008 that members of other faiths may obtain identity cards without listing their faiths, and without becoming officially recognized. Clashes continued between police and supporters of former President Mohamed Morsi. At least 595 civilians were killed in Cairo on the 14th of August 2013, the worst mass killing in Egypt's modern history. Egypt actively practices capital punishment. Egypt's authorities do not release figures on death sentences and executions, Despite repeated requests over the years by human rights organizations, the United Nations Human Rights Office and various NGOs expressed deep alarm after an Egyptian minor criminal court sentenced 529 people to death in a single hearing on the 25th of March 2014. Sentenced supporters of former President Mohamed Morsi will be executed for their alleged role in violence following his ousting in July 2013. The judgment was condemned as a violation of international law. By May 2014, approximately 16,000 people and as high as more than 40,000 by one independent count, mostly Brotherhood members or supporters, have been imprisoned after the coup. After the Muslim Brotherhood was labeled as terrorist organization by the post-coup interim Egyptian government. After Morsi was ousted by the military, the judiciary system aligned itself with the new government, actively supporting the repression of Muslim Brotherhood members. This resulted in a sharp increase in mass death sentences that arose criticism from then U.S. President Barack Obama and the General Secretary of the UN, Ban Ki-moon. Homosexuality is illegal in Egypt. According to a 2013 survey by the Pew Research Center, 95% of Egyptians believe that homosexuality should not be accepted by society. In 2017, Cairo was voted the most dangerous megacity for women with more than 10 million inhabitants in a poll by Thomson Reuters Foundation. Sexual harassment was described as occurring on a daily basis.
Freedom of the press.
Reporters Without Borders ranked Egypt in their 2017 World Press Freedom Index at 160 out of 180 nations. At least 18 journalists were imprisoned in Egypt. A new anti-terror law was enacted in August 2015 that threatens members of the media with fines ranging from about $25,000 to $60,000 for the distribution of wrong information on acts of terror inside the country that differ from official declarations of the Egyptian Department of Defense.
Military and foreign relations.
The military is influential in the political and economic life of Egypt and exempts itself from laws that apply to other sectors. It enjoys considerable power, prestige and independence within the state and has been widely considered part of the Egyptian deep state. According to the former chair of Israel's Knesset Foreign Affairs and Defense Committee, Yuval Stinitz, the Egyptian Air Force has roughly the same number of modern warplanes as the Israeli Air Force and far more Western tanks, artillery, anti-aircraft batteries and warships than the IDF. Egypt is speculated by Israel to be the second country in the region with a spy satellite, EgyptSat-1, in addition to EgyptSat-2 launched on the 16th of April 2014. The United States provides Egypt with annual military assistance, which in 2015 amounted to $3 billion. In 1989, Egypt was designated as a major non-NATO ally of the United States. Nevertheless, ties between the two countries have partially soured since the July 2013 overthrow of Islamist President Mohamed Morsi, with the Obama administration denouncing Egypt over its crackdown on the Muslim Brotherhood, and cancelling future military exercises involving the two countries. There have been recent attempts, however, to normalize relations between the two, with both governments frequently calling for mutual support in the fight against regional and international terrorism. However, following the election of Republican Donald Trump as the President of the United States, the two countries were looking to improve the Egyptian-American relations. Al-Sisi and Trump had met during the opening of the 71st session of the United Nations General Assembly in September 2016. The absence of Egypt in President Trump's travel ban towards 7 Muslim countries was noted in Washington, although the Congress has voiced human rights concerns over the handling of dissidents. On the 3rd of April 2017, Al-Sisi met with Trump at the White House, marking the first visit of an Egyptian president to Washington in 8 years. Trump praised Al-Sisi in what was reported as a public relations victory for the Egyptian president, and signaled it was time for a normalization of the relations between Egypt and the US. The Egyptian military has dozens of factories manufacturing weapons as well as consumer goods. The armed forces inventory includes equipment from different countries around the world. Equipment from the former Soviet Union is being progressively replaced by more modern US, French, and British equipment, a significant portion of which is built under license in Egypt, such as the M1 Abrams tank. Relations with Russia have improved significantly following Mohammad Morsi's removal, and both countries have worked since then to strengthen military and trade ties among other aspects of bilateral cooperation. Relations with China have also improved considerably. In 2014, Egypt and China established a bilateral comprehensive strategic partnership. In July 2019, UN ambassadors of 37 countries, including Egypt, have signed a joint letter to the UN defending China's treatment of Uyghurs in the Xinjiang region. The permanent headquarters of the Arab League are located in Cairo, and the body's Secretary-General has traditionally been Egyptian. This position is currently held by former Foreign Minister Ahmed Aboul Gheit. The Arab League briefly moved from Egypt to Tunis in 1978 to protest the Egypt-Israel peace treaty, but it later returned to Cairo in 1989. Gulf monarchies, including the United Arab Emirates and Saudi Arabia, have pledged billions of dollars to help Egypt overcome its economic difficulties since the July 2013 coup. Following the 1973 war and the subsequent peace treaty, Egypt became the first Arab nation to establish diplomatic relations with Israel. Despite that, Israel is still widely considered as a hostile state by the majority of Egyptians. Egypt has played a historical role as a mediator in resolving various disputes in the Middle East, most notably its handling of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict and the peace process. Egypt's ceasefire and truce brokering efforts in Gaza have hardly been challenged following Israel's evacuation of its settlements from the Strip in 2005. Despite increasing animosity towards the Hamas government in Gaza following the ouster of Mohammad Morsi, and despite recent attempts by countries like Turkey and Qatar to take over this role, ties between Egypt and other non-Arab Middle Eastern nations, including Iran and Turkey, have often been strained. Tensions with Iran are mostly due to Egypt's peace treaty with Israel and Iran's rivalry with traditional Egyptian allies in the Gulf. Turkey's recent support for the now-banned Muslim Brotherhood in Egypt and its alleged involvement in Libya also made of both countries bitter regional rivals. Egypt is a founding member of the Non-Aligned Movement and the United Nations. It is also a member of the Organisation Internationale de la Francophonie since 1983. Former Egyptian Deputy Prime Minister Boutros Ghali served as Secretary-General of the United Nations from 1991 to 1996. In 2008, Egypt was estimated to have 2 million African refugees, including over 20,000 Sudanese nationals registered with UNHCR as refugees fleeing armed conflict or asylum seekers. Egypt adopted harsh, sometimes lethal methods of border control.
Administrative divisions.
Egypt is divided into 27 governorates. The governorates are further divided into regions. The regions contain towns and villages. Each governorate has a capital, sometimes carrying the same name as the governorate. Microsoft Encarta Online similarly estimates the Sunni population at 90% of the total. The Pew Forum on Religion and Public Life gave a higher estimate of the Muslim population, at 94.6%. In 2017, the government-owned newspaper, The Regularity and Richness of the Annual Nile River Flood, coupled with semi-isolation provided by deserts to the east and west, allowed for the development of one of the world's great civilizations. A unified kingdom arose circa 3200 BC, and a series of dynasties ruled in Egypt for the next 3 millennia. The last native dynasty fell to the Persians in 341 BC, who in turn were replaced by the Greeks, Romans, and Byzantines. It was the Arabs who introduced Islam in the Arabic language in the 7th century and who ruled for the next 6 centuries. A local military caste, The Mamelukes took control about 1250 and continued to govern after the conquest of Egypt by the Ottoman Turks in 1517. Completion of the Suez Canal in 1869 elevated Egypt as an important world transportation hub. Ostensibly to protect its investments, Britain seized control of Egypt's government in 1882, but nominal allegiance to the Ottoman Empire continued until 1914. Partially independent from the UK in 1922, Egypt acquired full sovereignty from Britain in 1952. The completion of the Aswan High Dam in 1971 and the resultant Lake Nasser have reaffirmed the time-honored place of the Nile River in the agriculture and ecology of Egypt. A rapidly growing population, the largest in the Arab world, limited arable land, and dependence on the Nile all continue to overtax resources and stress society. The government has struggled to meet the demands of Egypt's fast-growing population as it implements far-reaching economic reforms, including the reduction of select subsidies, large-scale infrastructure projects, energy cooperation, and foreign direct investment appeals.
Inspired by the 2010 Tunisian revolution, Egyptian opposition groups led demonstrations in labor strikes countrywide, culminating in President Hosni Mubarak's ouster in 2011. Egypt's military assumed national leadership until a new parliament was in place in early 2012. Later that same year, Mohamed Morsi won the presidential election. Following protests throughout the spring of 2013 against Morsi's government and the Muslim Brotherhood, the Egyptian armed forces intervened and removed Morsi from power in July 2013 and replaced him with interim President Adli Mansour. Simultaneously, the government began enacting laws to limit freedoms of assembly and expression. In January 2014, voters approved a new constitution by referendum and in May 2014 elected former Defense Minister Abdel Fattah el-Sisi president. Egypt elected a new legislature in December 2015, its first parliament since 2012. El-Sisi was re-elected to a second four-year term in March 2018. In April 2019, Egypt approved via national referendum a set of constitutional amendments extending el-Sisi's term in office through 2024 and possibly through 2030 if re-elected for a third term. The amendments would also allow future presidents up to 2 consecutive 6-year terms in office, re-establish the Senate, allow for 1 or more vice presidents, establish a 25% quota for female parliamentarians, reaffirm the military's role as guardian of Egypt, and expand presidential authority to appoint the heads of judicial councils.
Geography.
Egypt.
Location. Northern Africa, bordering the Mediterranean Sea, between Libya and the Gaza Strip, and the Red Sea north of Sudan, and includes the Asian Sinai Peninsula.
Geographic coordinates 2700 N, 3000 E.
Map references. Africa.
Area total
1,001,450 square kilometers.
Land
995,450 square kilometers.
Water
6,000 square kilometers.
Country comparison to the world
31.
Area comparative more than 8 times the size of Ohio, slightly more than 3 times the size of New Mexico.
Area comparison map.
Area comparison map.
Land boundaries, total
2,612 kilometers.
Border countries, 4.
Gaza Strip 13 kilometers, Israel 208 kilometers, Libya 1,115 kilometers, Sudan 1,276 kilometers.
Coastline 2,450 kilometers.
Maritime claims, territorial sea
12 nanometers.
Exclusive economic zone
200 nanometers or the equidistant median line with Cyprus.
Contiguous zone
24 nanometers.
Continental shelf
200 nanometers.
Climate desert, hot, dry summers with moderate winters.
Terrain, vast desert plateau interrupted by Nile Valley and Delta.
Elevation, mean elevation
321 meters.
Lowest point
Qattara Depression minus 133 meters.
Highest point
Mount Catherine 2,629 meters.
Natural resources, petroleum, natural gas, iron ore, phosphates, manganese, limestone, gypsum, talc, asbestos, lead, Rare earth elements, zinc.
Land use, agricultural land,
3.6%.
arable land,
2.8%. Permanent crops,
0.8%, permanent pasture,
0%.
forest,
0.1%.
other,
96.3%.
irrigated land, 36,500 square kilometers.
Population distribution. Approximately 95% of the population lives within 20 kilometers of the Nile River and its delta. Vast areas of the country remain sparsely populated or uninhabited.
Natural hazards, periodic droughts, frequent earthquakes, flash floods, landslides, hot, driving windstorms called camps occur in spring, dust storms, sandstorms.
Environment. Current issues. Agricultural land being lost to urbanization in wind-blown sands. Increasing soil salination below Aswan High Dam. Desertification. Oil pollution threatening coral reefs, beaches, and marine habitats. Other water pollution from agricultural pesticides, raw sewage, and industrial effluents. Limited natural fresh water resources away from the Nile, which is the only perennial water source. Rapid growth in population overstraining the Nile and natural resources.
Environment, international agreements. Party 2.
Biodiversity, climate change Kyoto Protocol. Desertification, endangered species, environmental modification, hazardous wastes, law of the sea, marine dumping, ozone layer protection, ship pollution, tropical timber 83, tropical timber 94, wetlands.
Signed, but not ratified.
None of the selected agreements.
Geography. Note, controls Sinai Peninsula, the only land bridge between Africa and remainder of Eastern Hemisphere. Controls Suez Canal, a sea link between Indian Ocean and Mediterranean Sea. Size, and juxtaposition to Israel, establish its major role in Middle Eastern geopolitics, dependence on upstream neighbors, dominance of Nile Basin issues, prone to influxes of refugees from Sudan and the Palestinian territories.
People and society.
Egypt.
Population 99,413,317.
Country comparison to the world.
14.
Nationality, noun.
Egyptian, S.
Adjective.
Egyptian.
Ethnic groups. Egyptian 99.7%, other 0.3%.
Note.
Data represent respondents by nationality.
Languages. Arabic, official. Arabic, English, and French widely understood by educated classes.
Religions. Muslim, predominantly Sunni 90%, Christian, majority Coptic Orthodox. Other Christians include Armenian Apostolic, Catholic, Maronite, Orthodox, and Anglican 10%.
Demographic profile. Egypt is the most populous country in the Arab world and the third most populous country in Africa, behind Nigeria and Ethiopia. Most of the country is desert, so about 95% of the population is concentrated in a narrow strip of fertile land along the Nile River, which represents only about 5% of Egypt's land area. Egypt's rapid population growth -46% between 1994 and 2014 stresses limited natural resources, jobs, housing, sanitation, education, and healthcare.
Although the country's total fertility rate, DFR, fell from roughly 5.5 children per woman in 1980 to just over 3 in the late 1990s, largely as a result of state-sponsored family planning programs. The population growth rate dropped more modestly because of decreased mortality rates and longer life expectancies. During the last decade, Egypt's DFR decline stalled for several years and then reversed, reaching 3.6 in 2011, and has plateaued the last few years. Contraceptive use has held steady at about 60%, while preferences for larger families and early marriage may have strengthened in the wake of the recent 2011 revolution. The large cohort of women of or nearing childbearing age will sustain high population growth for the foreseeable future, an effect called population momentum.
Nevertheless, post-Mubarak governments have not made curbing population growth a priority. To increase contraceptive use and to prevent further overpopulation will require greater government commitment and substantial social change, including encouraging smaller families and better educating and empowering women. Currently, literacy, educational attainment, and labor force participation rates are much lower for women than men. In addition, the prevalence of violence against women, the lack of female political representation, and the perpetuation of the nearly universal practice of female genital cutting continue to keep women from playing a more significant role in Egypt's public sphere.
Population pressure, poverty, high unemployment, and the fragmentation of inherited land holdings have historically motivated Egyptians, primarily young men, to migrate internally from rural and smaller urban areas in the Nile Delta region and the poorer rural south to Cairo, Alexandria, and other urban centers in the north, while a much smaller number migrated to the Red Sea and Sinai areas. Waves of forced internal migration also resulted from the 1967 Arab-Israeli War and the floods caused by the completion of the Aswan High Dam in 1970. Limited numbers of students and professionals emigrated temporarily prior to the early 1970s, when economic problems and high unemployment pushed the Egyptian government to lift restrictions on labor migration. At the same time, high oil revenues enabled Saudi Arabia, Iraq, and other Gulf states, as well as Libya and Jordan, to fund development projects, creating a demand for unskilled labor, mainly in construction, which attracted tens of thousands of young Egyptian men.
Between 1970 and 1974 alone, Egyptian migrants in the Gulf countries increased from approximately 70,000 to 370,000. Egyptian officials encouraged legal labor migration both to alleviate unemployment and to generate remittance income. Remittances continue to be one of Egypt's largest sources of foreign currency and GDP. During the mid-1980s, however, depressed oil prices resulting from the Iran-Iraq War decreased demand for low-skilled labor, competition from less costly South Asian workers, and efforts to replace foreign workers with locals significantly reduced Egyptian migration to the Gulf states. The number of Egyptian migrants dropped from a peak of almost 3.3 million in 1983 to about 2.2 million at the start of the 1990s, but numbers gradually recovered.
In the 2000s, Egypt began facilitating more labor migration through bilateral agreements, notably with Arab countries and Italy, but illegal migration to Europe through overstayed visas or maritime human smuggling via Libya also rose. The Egyptian government estimated there were 6.5 million Egyptian migrants in 2009, with roughly 75% being temporary migrants in other Arab countries, Libya, Saudi Arabia, Jordan, Kuwait, and the United Arab Emirates, and 25% being predominantly permanent migrants in the West, US, UK, Italy, France, and Canada.
During the 2000s, Egypt became an increasingly important transit and destination country for economic migrants and asylum seekers, including Palestinians, East Africans, and South Asians and, more recently, Iraqis and Syrians. Egypt draws many refugees because of its resettlement programs with the West. Cairo has one of the largest urban refugee populations in the world. Many East African migrants are interned or live in temporary encampments along the Egypt-Israel border, and some have been shot and killed by Egyptian border guards.
Age structure: 0–14 years,
33.38%. Male 17,177,977. Female 16,007,877.
15–24 years,
18.65%. Male 9,551,309. Female 8,988,006.
25–54 years,
37.71%. Male 19,053,300. Female 18,431,808.
55–64 years,
5.99%. Male 2,956,535. Female 2,995,497.
65 years and over,
4.28%. Male 2,058,217. Female 2,192,791.
population pyramid,
Population pyramid.
dependency ratios,
Dependency ratios are a measure of the age structure of a population. They relate the number of individuals that are likely to be economically dependent on the support of others. Dependency ratios contrast the ratio of youths, ages 0 to 14, and the elderly, ages 65 plus, to the number of those in the working age group, ages 15 to 64. Changes in the dependency ratio provide an indication of potential social support requirements resulting from changes in population age structures, as fertility leave. More dependency ratios field listing.
Total dependency ratio
61.8.
Youth dependency ratio
53.6.
Elderly dependency ratio
8.2.
Potential support ratio
12.2.
Median age total
23.9 years.
Male
23.6 years.
Female
24.3 years.
Country comparison to the world
167.
Population growth rate 2.38%.
Country comparison to the world
28.
Birth rate 28.8 births out of 1,000 population.
Country comparison to the world
42.
Death rate 4.5 deaths out of 1,000 population.
Country comparison to the world
204.
Net migration rate minus 0.4 migrant s out of 1,000 population.
Country comparison to the world
122.
Population distribution. Approximately 95% of the population lives within 20 kilometers of the Nile River and its delta. Vast areas of the country remain sparsely populated or uninhabited.
Urbanization. Urban population
42.7% of total population.
rate of urbanization
1.86% annual rate of change.
Major urban areas population 20.076 million Cairo, capital 5.086 million Alexandria.
Sex ratio at birth
1.06 male every 1 female.
0-14 years
1.07 male every 1 female.
15-24 years
1.06 male every 1 female.
25-54 years
1.03 male every 1 female.
55-64 years
0.99 male every 1 female.
65 years and over.
0.94 male every 1 female.
Total population
1.04 male every 1 female.
Mother's mean age at first birth 22.7 years.
Note:
Median age at first birth among women 25-29.
maternal mortality rate 33 deaths/100,000 live births.
Country comparison to the world
110.
Infant mortality rate total
18.3 deaths out of 1,000 live births.
male
19.5 deaths out of 1,000 live births.
female.
17 deaths out of 1,000 live births.
Country comparison to the world
85.
life expectancy at birth total population
73.2 years.
male
71.8 years.
female.
74.7 years.
Country comparison to the world
140.
total fertility rate 3.41 children born. Woman
Country comparison to the world
45.
contraceptive prevalence rate 58.5%.
Drinking water source improved
Urban
100% of population.
rural
99% of population.
total
99.4% of population.
unimproved
Urban
0% of population.
rural
1% of population.
total
0.6% of population.
current health expenditure.
Current health expenditure (CHE) describes the share of spending on health in each country relative to the size of its economy. It includes expenditures corresponding to the final consumption of healthcare goods and services and excludes investment, exports, and intermediate consumption. CHE shows the importance of the health sector in the economy and indicates the priority given to health in monetary terms. Note:
Current health expenditure replaces the former health expenditures field. More current health expenditure field listing.
4.2%.
Physicians density 0.79 physicians out of 1,000 population.
Hospital bed density 1.6 beds out of 1,000 population.
Sanitation facility access improved.
Urban
96.8% of population.
rural
93.1% of population.
total
94.7% of population.
Unimproved.
Urban.
3.2% of population.
Rural.
6.9% of population.
Total.
5.3% of population.
HIV/AIDS, adult prevalence rate, less than 1%, less than /voice required equals name equals see a voice Jess. English, England, greater than HIV/AIDS, people living with HIV/AIDS less than /voice required equals name equals Ivona to Brian /voice required equals name equals see a voice Jess. English, England, greater than 16,000, less than /voice required equals name equals Ivona to Brian greater than country comparison to the world less than /voice.
85.
HIV/AIDS, deaths, less than 500, less than /voice required equals name equals see a voice Jess. English, England, greater than major infectious diseases less than /voice required equals name equals Ivona to Brian /voice required equals name equals see a voice Jess. English, England, greater than degree of risk less than /voice required equals name equals Ivona to Brian greater than intermediate less than /voice required equals name equals see a voice Jess. English, England, greater than food or waterborne diseases less than /voice required equals name equals Ivona to Brian greater than bacterial diarrhea, hepatitis A, and typhoid fever less than /voice required equals name equals see a voice Jess. English, England, greater than water contact diseases less than /voice required equals name equals Ivona to Brian greater than schistosomiasis less than /voice required equals name equals see a voice Jess. English, England, greater than obesity, adult prevalence rate less than /voice required equals name equals Ivona to Brian /voice required equals name equals see a voice Jess. English, England, greater than 32% less than /voice country comparison to the world.
18.
Children under the age of 5 years underweight 7%.
Country comparison to the world.
74.
Education expenditures. NA.
Literacy, definition.
Age 15 and over can read and write.
Total population.
80.8%.
Male.
86.5%.
Female.
75%.
School life expectancy. Primary to tertiary education. Total.
13 years.
Male.
13 years.
Female.
13 years.
Unemployment. Youth ages 15-24. Total.
29.6%.
Male.
25.7%.
Female.
38.3%.
Country comparison to the world.
33.
Government.
Egypt.
Country name. Conventional long form.
Arab Republic of Egypt.
Conventional short form.
Egypt.
Local long form.
Jumhuriyat Misr al-Araba.
Local short form.
Mis.
Former.
United Arab Republic. With Syria.
Etymology.
The English name, Egypt, derives from the ancient Greek name for the country, Aegyptos. The Arabic name, Misr, can be traced to the ancient Akkadian, Misru, meaning border or frontier.
Government type, Presidential Republic.
Capital name,
Cairo.
Geographic coordinates,
3003N, 3115E.
time difference,
UTC +2, 7 hours ahead of Washington, D.C., during Standard Time.
etymology,
From the Arabic al-Kahira, meaning the victorious.
administrative divisions, 27 governorates, Muhafazat, singular Muhafazat, Ad-Darkaliya, Al-Bahr al-Ahmar, Red Sea, Al-Bahira, Al-Fayyum, Al-Ghaliya, Al-Iskandara, Alexandria, Al-Ismailia, Ismailia, Al-Jizza, Giza, Al-Manufaya, Al-Minya, Al-Kahira, Cairo, Al-Qaibiyya, Al-Aqsa, Luxor, Al-Wadi al-Jadid, New Valley, Suez, Suez, Ash-Shariya, Aswan, Asiyat, Bani Suwaif, Bursa'id, Port Said, Dumyat, Damietta, Janub Sina, South Sinai, Kafrash Sheikh, Matro, Kina, Shamal Sina, North Sinai, Suhaj.
Independence. The 28th of February 1922, from UK Protectorate status. The military-led revolution that began on the 23rd of July 1952 led to a republic being declared on the 18th of June 1953 and all British troops withdrawn on the 18th of June 1956. Note, it was ca. 3200 BC that the two lands of Upper, Southern, and Lower, Northern, Egypt were first united politically.
National holiday. Revolution Day, the 23rd of July, 1952.
Constitution. History.
Several previous, latest approved by a constitutional committee in December 2013, approved by referendum held on 14th to the 15th of 2014, ratified by interim president on the 19th of January 2014.
Amendments.
Proposed by the President of the Republic or by 1/5 of the House of Representatives members. A decision to accept the proposal requires majority vote by House members. Passage of amendment requires a 2/3 majority vote by House members and passage by majority vote in a referendum. Articles of Re-election of the President and Principles of Freedom not amendable unless the amendment brings more guarantees. Amended 2019. 2019.
Legal system. Mixed legal system based on Napoleonic civil and penal law, Islamic religious law, and vestiges of colonial-era laws. Judicial review of the constitutionality of laws by the Supreme Constitutional Court.
International Law Organization participation accepts compulsory ICJ jurisdiction with reservations. Non-party state to the Act.
Citizenship. Citizenship by birth.
No.
Citizenship by descent only.
If the father was born in Egypt.
Dual citizenship recognized.
Only with prior permission from the government.
Residency requirement for naturalization.
10 years.
Suffrage. 18 years of age. Universal and compulsory.
Executive branch. Chief of State.
President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi. Since the 8th of June 2014.
Head of Government.
Prime Minister Mostafa Madbouli. Since the 7th of June 2018. Note, Prime Minister Sharif Ismail. Since the 12th of September 2015. Resigned the 6th of June 2018.
Cabinet.
Cabinet ministers nominated by the executive authorities and approved by the House of Representatives.
Elections/appointments.
President elected by absolute majority popular vote in 2 rounds if needed for a 6-year term, eligible for a second consecutive term. Election last held on 26th to 28th of March 2018. Next to be held in 2024. Prime Minister appointed by the President, approved by the House of Representatives. Note,
the presidential term was extended from 4 to 6 years, following approval in a constitutional amendment approved by referendum in April 2019.
Election results.
Abdel Fattah el-Sisi re-elected president in first round. Percent of valid votes cast. Abdel Fattah el-Sisi, independent, 97.1%. Musa Mostafa Musa, El Ghaad Party, 2.9%. Note, more than 7% of ballots cast were deemed invalid.
Legislative branch. Description. Unicameral House of Representatives, Majlis al-Noab, 596 seats, 448 members directly elected by individual candidacy system, 120 members, with quotas for women, youth, Christians and workers, elected in party list constituencies by simple majority popular vote, and 28 members appointed by the President. Members serve 5-year terms. Note, inaugural session held on the 10th of January 2016.
Note,
a referendum held in April 2019, approved a constitutional amendment, effective following the 2020 election, to restore the upper chamber of the legislative body, designated the Senate, with 180 seats, 60 members to be appointed by the President and 120 members to be directly elected. The amendment also calls for the reduction of the existing People's Assembly from 596 to 450 seats.
Elections.
Multi-phase election completed on the 16th of December 2015. Next to be held in 2020.
Election results.
Percent of vote by party, NA, seats by party, Free Egyptians Party 65, Future of the Nation 53, New Waft Party 36, Homelands Protector Party 18, Republican People's Party 13, Congress Party 12, Al-Nur Party 11, Conservative Party 6, Democratic Peace Party 5, Egyptian National Movement 4, Egyptian Social Democratic Party 4, Modern Egypt Party 4, Freedom Party 3, My Homeland Egypt Party 3, Reform and Development Party 3, National Progressive Unionist Party 2, Arab Democratic Nasserist Party 1, El Sahel Masri El Hor 1, Revolutionary Guards Party 1, Independent 351, Composition, Men 507, Women 89%, of women 14.9%.
Judicial branch, highest courts.
Supreme Constitutional Court, SEC, consists of the court president and 10 justices. The SEC serves as the final court of arbitration on the constitutionality of laws and conflicts between lower courts regarding jurisdiction and rulings. Court of Cassation, CC, consists of the court president and 550 judges organized in circuits with cases heard by panels of 5 judges. The CC is the highest appeals body for civil and criminal cases, also known as ordinary justices. Supreme Administrative Court, SAC, consists of the court president and NA judges and organized in circuits with cases heard by panels of 5 judges. The SAC is the highest court of the State Council.
Judge selection in term of office.
Under the 2014 Constitution, all judges and justices selected and appointed by the Supreme Judiciary Council and approved as a formality by the President of the Republic. Judges appointed for life, under the 2019 amendments. The President has the power to appoint heads of judiciary authorities and courts, the Prosecutor General, and the head of the Supreme Constitutional Court. This new power institutionalizes a process President El-Sisi established by decree in 2017.
Subordinate courts.
Courts of Appeal, Courts of First Instance, Courts of Limited Jurisdiction, Family Court, established in 2004.
Political parties and leaders. Al-Now, Eunice McKeon.
Arab Democratic Nasserist Party, Dr. Mohammed Abdullah.
Congress Party, Omar Al-Mokhtar Semida.
Conservative Party, Akmal Ktam.
Democratic Peace Party, Ahmed Fardali.
Egyptian National Movement Party, Gen. Raouf El Sayed.
Egyptian Social Democratic Party, Farid Zahran.
El Gad Party, Musa Mostafa Musa.
El Sahel Masri El Hor, Tariq Ahmed Abbas Nadim.
Freedom Party, Salah Hassaballah.
Free Egyptians Party, Essam Khalil.
Homelands Protector Party, Lieutenant Gen. Retired, Gal Al-Haridi.
Modern Egypt Party, Nabi Dibis.
Nations Future Party, Mostaqbal Watan, Mohammed Ashraf Rashad.
My Homeland Egypt Party, General Saif al-Islam Abdel Bary.
National Progressive Unionist, Tagamu Party, Syed Abdulal.
Reform and Development Party, Mohammed Anwar al-Sadat.
Republican People's Party, Hazim Emar.
Revolutionary Guards Party, Magdi al-Sharif.
Waft Party, Bo Abu Shoka.
International Organization Participation, Abeda, AFP, OFST, AMF, O, PSEC, Observer, Q, CD, Chika, Comera, D8, EBT, FAO, G15, G24, G77, EA, IBD, ICAO, ICC, National Committees, ICRM, IDA, IDB, IFAD, IFX, EHO, ELO, IMF, EMO, IMSO, Interpol, IOC, IOM, IPU, ISO, ITSO, ITU, LAS, MIGA, MINUSO, MINUSMA, MONUSCO, NAM, OPIC, OAS, Observer, OAK, OIF, OS, Partner, CA, UN, UNAMID, UNCTAD, UNESCO, UNHCR, UNIDO, UNMISS, UNOC, UNWA, UNWUTO, UPU, UCO, UF2, NGOs, WHO, WIPO, WMO, WITO.
Diplomatic representation in the U.S. Chief of Mission.
Ambassador Yasser Rada, since the 19th of September 2015.
Chancery.
3521 International Court Northwest, Washington, D.C. 20008.
Telephone.
1-202-895-5400.
Fax.
1-202-244-5131.
Consulates General.
Chicago, Houston, Los Angeles, New York.
Diplomatic representation from the U.S. Chief of Mission.
Ambassador, vacant. Charged Affairs Thomas H. Goldberger, since the 30th of June 2017.
Embassy.
5 Tawfik Diab Street, Garden City, Cairo.
Mailing address.
Unit 64900, Box 15, APOA 09839-4900, 5 Tawfik Diab Street, Garden City, Cairo.
Telephone.
20-2, 2797 to 3300.
Fax.
20-2, 2797 to 3200.
Flag description. 3 equal horizontal bands of red, top, white, and black. The national emblem, a gold eagle of Saladin facing the hoist side with a shield superimposed on its chest above a scroll bearing the name of the country in Arabic. Centered in the white band, the band colors derive from the Arab liberation flag and represent oppression: black, overcome through bloody struggle; red, to be replaced by a bright future; white.
Note.
Similar to the flag of Syria, which has 2 green stars in the white band, Iraq, which has an Arabic inscription centered in the white band, and Yemen, which has a plain white band.
National symbol, S. Golden eagle, white lotus. National colors,
red, white, black.
National anthem, name,
By Lady, by Lady, by Lady, my homeland, my homeland, my homeland.
Lyrics/music.
Yunis Al-Ghaidi, Syed Darwish.
Note.
Adopted 1979, the current anthem, less militaristic than the previous one, was created after the signing of the 1979 peace treaty with Israel. Syed Darwish, commonly considered the father of modern Egyptian music, composed the anthem.
Economy.
Egypt.
Economy overview. Occupying the northeast corner of the African continent, Egypt is bisected by the highly fertile Nile Valley where most economic activity takes place. Egypt's economy was highly centralized during the rule of former President Gamal Abdel Nasser but opened up considerably under former Presidents Anwar el-Sadat and Mohammed Hosni Mubarak. Agriculture, hydrocarbons, manufacturing, tourism, and other service sectors drove the country's relatively diverse economic activity.
Despite Egypt's mixed record for attracting foreign investment over the past 2 decades, poor living conditions and limited job opportunities have contributed to public discontent. These socio-economic pressures were a major factor leading to the January 2011 revolution that ousted Mubarak. The uncertain political, security, and policy environment since 2011 has restricted economic growth and failed to alleviate persistent unemployment, especially among the young.
In late 2016, persistent dollar shortages and waning aid from its Gulf allies led Cairo to turn to the IMF for a 3-year, $12 billion loan program. To secure the deal, Cairo floated its currency, introduced new taxes, and cut energy subsidies, all of which pushed inflation above 30% for most of 2017, a high that had not been seen in a generation. Since the currency float, foreign investment in Egypt's high-interest treasury bills has risen exponentially, boosting both dollar availability and central bank reserves. Cairo will be challenged to obtain foreign and local investment in manufacturing and other sectors without a sustained effort to implement a range of business reforms.
GDP. Purchasing power parity, $1.204 trillion.
$1.155 trillion.
$1.107 trillion.
Note.
Data are in 2017 dollars.
Country comparison to the world.
21.
GDP. Official exchange rate. $236.5 billion.
GDP. Real growth rate. 4.2%.
4.3%.
4.4%.
Country comparison to the world.
71.
GDP per capita, PPP, $12,700.
$12,800.
$12,400.
Note.
Data in 2017 dollars.
Country comparison to the world.
124.
Gross national saving. 9% of GDP.
9.1% of GDP.
10.6% of GDP.
Country comparison to the world.
166.
GDP composition by end use. Household consumption
86.8%.
Government consumption
10.1%.
Investment in fixed capital
14.8%.
Investment in inventories
0.5%.
Exports of goods and services
16.3%.
Imports of goods and services
minus 28.5%.
GDP composition by sector of origin. Agriculture
11.7%.
Industry
34.3%.
Services
54%.
Agriculture products. Cotton, rice, corn, wheat, beans, fruits, vegetables, cattle, water buffalo, sheep, goats.
Industries, textiles, food processing, tourism, chemicals, pharmaceuticals, hydrocarbons, construction, cement, metals, light manufactures.
Industrial production growth rate 3.5%.
Country comparison to the world.
84.
Labor force 29.95 million.
Country comparison to the world.
22.
Labor force by occupation. Agriculture
25.8%.
Industry
25.1%.
Services
49.1%.
Unemployment rate 12.2%.
12.7%.
Country comparison to the world.
161.
Population below poverty line 27.8%.
Household income or consumption by percentage share, lowest 10%,
4%,
highest 10%.
26.6%.
Distribution of family income, Gini index 31.8.
29.8.
Country comparison to the world.
124.
Budget, revenues,
42.32 billion.
expenditures,
62.61 billion.
taxes and other revenues, 17.9% of GDP.
Country comparison to the world.
165.
Budget surplus, plus, or deficit, minus 8.6% of GDP.
Country comparison to the world.
202.
Public debt, 103% of GDP.
96.8% of GDP.
Note:
Data cover central government debt and include debt instruments issued or owned by government entities other than the Treasury. The data include Treasury debt held by foreign entities. The data include debt issued by subnational entities, as well as intragovernmental debt. Intragovernmental debt consists of Treasury borrowings from surpluses in the social funds, such as for retirement, medical care, and unemployment. Debt instruments for the social funds are sold at public auctions.
Country comparison to the world.
14.
Fiscal year, the 1st July to the 30th June.
Inflation rate. Consumer prices, 23.5%.
10.2%.
Country comparison to the world.
217.
Central bank discount rate, 19.25%. The 9th of July 2017.
15.25%. The 3rd of November 2016.
Country comparison to the world.
7.
Commercial bank prime lending rate, 18.18%.
13.6%.
Country comparison to the world.
20.
Stock of narrow money, $43.4 billion.
$34.51 billion.
Country comparison to the world.
56.
Stock of broad money, $43.4 billion.
$34.51 billion.
Country comparison to the world.
56.
Stock of domestic credit, $193.4 billion.
$178.7 billion.
Country comparison to the world.
46.
Market value of publicly traded shares, $27.35 billion.
$25.07 billion.
$26.33 billion.
Country comparison to the world.
59.
Current account balance, minus $14.92 billion.
Minus $19.83 billion.
Country comparison to the world.
196.
Exports, $23.3 billion.
$20.02 billion.
Country comparison to the world.
68.
Exports, partners, UE 10.9%, Italy 10%, US 7.4%, UK 5.7%, Turkey 4.4%, Germany 4.3%, India 4.3%.
Exports: commodities, crude oil and petroleum products, fruits and vegetables, cotton, textiles, metal products, chemicals, processed food.
Imports: $59.78 billion.
$57.84 billion.
Country comparison to the world.
50.
Imports: commodities, machinery and equipment, foodstuffs, chemicals, wood products, fuels.
Imports: partners, China 7.9%, UAE 5.2%, Germany 4.8%, Saudi Arabia 4.6%, US 4.4%, Russia 4.3%.
Reserves of foreign exchange and gold: $35.89 billion.
$23.2 billion.
Country comparison to the world.
47.
Debt, external, $77.47 billion.
$62.38 billion.
Country comparison to the world.
56.
Stock of direct foreign investment, at home, $106.6 billion.
$97.14 billion.
Country comparison to the world.
45.
Stock of direct foreign investment, abroad, $7.426 billion.
$7.257 billion.
Country comparison to the world.
69.
Exchange rates: Egyptian pounds, EGP, per US dollar.
18.05.
8.8.
10.07.
7.7133.
7.08.
Energy:
Egypt.
electricity access, electrification, total population.
100%.
Electricity production: 183.5 billion kWh.
Country comparison to the world.
22.
Electricity consumption: 159.7 billion.
Country comparison to the world.
23.
Electricity exports: 1.158 billion kWh.
Country comparison to the world.
57.
Electricity imports: 54 million.
Country comparison to the world.
106.
Electricity installed generating capacity: 45.12 million kW.
Country comparison to the world.
23.
Electricity from fossil fuels: 91% of total installed capacity.
Country comparison to the world.
54.
Electricity from nuclear fuels: 0% of total installed capacity.
Country comparison to the world.
82.
Electricity from hydroelectric plants: 6% of total installed capacity.
Country comparison to the world.
129.
Electricity from other renewable sources: 2% of total installed capacity.
Country comparison to the world.
139.
Crude oil production: 589,400 barrels/day.
Country comparison to the world.
27.
Crude oil exports: 246,500 barrel/day.
Country comparison to the world.
29.
Crude oil imports: 64,760 barrels/day.
Country comparison to the world.
51.
Crude oil proved reserves: 4.4 billion barrel.
Country comparison to the world.
24.
Refined petroleum products production: 547,500 barrels/day.
Country comparison to the world.
31.
Refined petroleum products consumption: 878,000 barrel/day.
Country comparison to the world.
25.
Refined petroleum products exports: 47,360 barrels/day.
Country comparison to the world.
56.
Refined petroleum products imports: 280,200 barrel/day.
Country comparison to the world.
26.
Natural gas production: 50.86 billion qm.
Country comparison to the world.
16.
Natural gas consumption: 57.71 billion cubic meters.
Country comparison to the world.
13.
Natural gas exports: 212.4 million qm.
Country comparison to the world.
45.
Natural gas imports: 7.079 billion cubic meters.
Country comparison to the world.
29.
Natural gas proved reserves 2.186 trillion qm.
Country comparison to the world.
15.
Carbon dioxide emissions from consumption of energy 232.7 million mount.
Country comparison to the world.
30.
Communications.
Egypt
Telephones, fixed lines, total subscriptions.
6,604,849.
Subscriptions per 100 inhabitants.
7.
Country comparison to the world.
24.
Telephones, mobile cellular, total subscriptions.
102,958,194.
Subscriptions per 100 inhabitants.
106.
Country comparison to the world.
16.
Telephone system, general assessment.
One of the largest fixed-line systems in Africa and the Arab region. 4 mobile cellular networks, 3 international and 1 local, cover most populated area of Egypt. Telecom Egypt, the country's only fixed-line operator, is 80% state-owned. Principal centers at Alexandria, Cairo, Al-Mansoura, Ismailia, Suez, and Tantu are connected by coaxial cable and microwave radio relay. Launch of LTE in late 2017 greatly helped the capabilities of mobile broadband services and will continue to do so for future development.
Domestic.
Fixed line 8 per 100, mobile cellular 101 per 100.
International.
Country code 20, landing point for Alita. The CME-WE3 and CME-WE4 submarine cable networks, link around the globe. Flag, Falcon and Flag FIA, satellite Earth stations, 4, 2 Intelsats, Atlantic Ocean and Indian Ocean, 1 Arabsat, and 1 Inmarsat, tropospheric scatter to Sudan, microwave radio relay to Israel. A participant in Medratel, Mana subsea cable came into commercial use in late 2015, augmenting the country's considerable international bandwidth.
Broadcast media, mix of state-run and private broadcast media. State-run TV operates 2 national and 6 regional terrestrial networks, as well as a few satellite channels. Dozens of private satellite channels and a large number of Arabic satellite channels are available for free. Some limited satellite services are also available via subscription. State-run radio operates about 30 stations belonging to 8 networks. Privately owned radio includes 8 major stations, 4 of which belong to 1 network.
Internet country code. .eg.
Internet users, total.
38%
of population.
44.3%.
Country comparison to the world.
227.
Broadband, fixed subscriptions, total.
5,223,311.
Subscriptions per 100 inhabitants.
5.
Country comparison to the world.
28.
Communications. Note, one of the largest and most famous libraries in the ancient world was the Great Library of Alexandria in Egypt, founded about 295 BC. It may have survived in some form into the 5th century AD. Seeking to resurrect the great center of learning and communication, the Egyptian government in 2002 inaugurated the Bibliotheca Alexandrina, an Egyptian national library on the site of the original Great Library, which commemorates the original archive and also serves as a center of cultural and scientific excellence.
Transportation.
Egypt.
National Air Transport System. Number of registered air carriers.
14.
Inventory of registered aircraft operated by air carriers.
101.
Annual passenger traffic on registered air carriers.
10,159,464.
Annual freight traffic on registered air carriers.
397,531,535.
Civil aircraft registration country code prefix. SU.
Airports. 83.
Country comparison to the world.
65.
Airports, with paved runways, total.
72.
Over 3,047 meters.
15.
2,438 to 3,047 meters.
36.
1,524 to 2,437 meters.
15.
Under 914 meters.
6.
Airports, with unpaved runways, total
11.
2,438 to 3,047 meters.
1.
1,524 to 2,437 meters.
3.
914 to 1,523 meters.
4.
Under 914 meters.
3.
Heliports. 7.
Pipelines. 486 kilometers condensate, 74 kilometers condensate/gas, 7,986 kilometers gas, 957 kilometers liquid petroleum gas, 5,225 kilometers oil, 37 kilometers oil/gas/water, 895 kilometers refined products, 65 kilometers water.
Railways, total
5,085 kilometers.
standard gauge.
5,085 kilometers 1.435 m gauge. 62 kilometers electrified.
Country comparison to the world.
39.
Roadways, total
65,050 kilometers.
paved,
48,000 kilometers.
unpaved.
17,050 kilometers.
Country comparison to the world.
72.
Waterways, 3,500 kilometers, includes the Nile River, Lake Nasser, Alexandria-Cairo Waterway, and numerous smaller canals in Nile Delta. The Suez Canal, 193.5 kilometers including approaches, is navigable by ocean-going vessels drawing up to 17.68 meters.
Country comparison to the world.
29.
Merchant marine, total.
389.
By type.
Bulk carrier 14, container ship 8, general cargo 33, oil tanker 36, other 298.
Country comparison to the world.
44.
Ports and terminals. Major seaport. S.
Mediterranean Sea, Alexandria, Damietta, El Dikla, Port Said.
Oil terminal. S.
Ain Sukna Terminal, Sidi Kera Terminal.
Container port. S. Cheese.
Alexandria, 1,613,000, Port Said, East, 2,968,308.
LNG terminal. S. Export.
Damietta, Idku, Abuqua Bay.
Gulf of Suez. Suez.
Military and security.
Egypt.
Military expenditures 2 to 3% of GDP according to President El-Sisi, March 2017.
1.67% of GDP.
1.72% of GDP.
1.69% of GDP.
1.61% of GDP.
Country comparison to the world.
69.
Military branches. Army, Navy, Air Force, Air Defense Forces.
Military service age and obligation. 18-30 years of age for male conscript military service. Service obligation, 18-36 months, followed by a 9-year reserve obligation, voluntary enlistment possible from age 15.
Terrorism.
Egypt.
Terrorist groups. Home-based. Harakat Sawadmis. HASM. AIM. S.
Overthrow the Egyptian government.
Area. S. Of operation.
Cairo, Nile Delta, Western Desert, April 2018.
Islamic State of Iraq and Ashsham. ISIS. Sinai. AIM. S.
Spread the ISIS caliphate by eliminating the Egyptian government, destroying Israel, and establishing an Islamic emirate in the Sinai.
Area. S. Of operation.
Operational throughout Egypt, primarily in North Sinai.
Note.
Formerly known as Ansar Beit al-Maqdis, Core ISIS refers to Egypt as its Wilayat Sinai. April 2018.
Liwa al-Thora. AIM. S.
Overthrow the Egyptian government.
Area. S. Of operation.
Nile Delta, April 2018.
Terrorist groups. Foreign-based. Al-Qaeda. AQ. AIM. S.
Overthrow the Egyptian government and, ultimately, establish a pan-Islamic caliphate under a strict Salafi Muslim interpretation of Sharia.
Area. S. Of operation.
Maintains a long-time operational presence and established networks. April 2018.
Army of Islam. AWI. AIM. S.
Disrupt the Egyptian government's efforts to provide security and, ultimately, establish an Islamic caliphate.
Area. S. of operation.
Operational mainly in Cairo and the Sinai Peninsula.
Note:
Associated with ISIS. Sinai Province, formerly known as Ansar Beit al-Maqdis, targets Israeli government interests, sometimes in collaboration with the Mujahideen Shura Council in the environs of Jerusalem. April 2018.
Transnational issues.
Egypt.
Disputes. International. Sudan claims that Egypt de facto administers security and economic development of Halab region north of the 22nd parallel boundary. Egypt no longer shows its administration of the Bertoul trapezoid in Sudan on its maps. Gays and breaches in the security wall with Egypt in January 2008 highlight difficulties in monitoring the Sinai border. Saudi Arabia claims Egyptian-administered islands of Tiran and Sanafia.
Refugees and internally displaced persons. Refugees, country of origin.
70,021, West Bank and Gaza Strip. 131,433, Syria, refugees and asylum seekers. 43,003, Sudan, refugees and asylum seekers. 16,341, Eritrea, refugees and asylum seekers. 16,137, South Sudan, refugees and asylum seekers. 15,898, Ethiopia, refugees and asylum seekers. 6,903, Somalia, refugees and asylum seekers. 6,752, Iraq, refugees and asylum seekers. 2019.
IDPs.
97,000.
Trafficking in persons. Current situation.
Egypt is a source, transit, and destination country for men, women, and children subjected to sex trafficking and forced labor. Egyptian children, including the large population of street children, are vulnerable to forced labor in domestic service, begging in agriculture, or may be victims of sex trafficking or child sex tourism, which occurs in Cairo, Alexandria, and Luxor. Some Egyptian women and girls are sold into temporary or summer marriages with Gulf men through the complicity of their parents or marriage brokers, and are exploited for prostitution or forced labor. Egyptian men are subject to forced labor in neighboring countries, while adults from South and Southeast Asia and East Africa and increasingly Syrian refugees are forced to work in domestic service, construction, cleaning, and begging in Egypt. Women and girls, including migrants and refugees from Asia, Sub-Saharan Africa, and the Middle East, are sex trafficked in Egypt. The Egyptian military cracked down on criminal groups smuggling, abducting, trafficking, and extorting African migrants in the Sinai Peninsula, but the practice has re-emerged along Egypt's western border with Libya.
Tier rating.
Tier 2 watch list. Egypt does not fully comply with the minimum standards for the elimination of trafficking. However, it is making significant efforts to do so. The government gathered data nationwide on trafficking cases to better allocate and prioritize anti-trafficking efforts, but overall it did not demonstrate increased progress. Prosecutions increased in 2014, but no offenders were convicted for the second consecutive year. Fewer trafficking victims were identified in 2014, which represents a significant and ongoing decrease from the previous two reporting periods. The government relied on NGOs and international organizations to identify and refer victims to protective services, and focused on Egyptian victims and refused to provide some services to foreign victims, at times including shelter.